Welcome to video 2, Building Slimer. This is a Ghostbusters Slimer from the '84 film. This isn't the original, this is my version of it, but I am trying to get it as close as possible to the original. Every little piece here, I've looked up all the pictures I could find, and I wanted to make something that was as close to the screen used one as possible. So, I love Slimer. I think most people do. It's one of the only characters that you see throughout all the films. Even the bad ones. And he's been different each time. But this one is the '84, the original one. And I really fell in love with that movie, so I wanted to build something that was as close to that one as possible. I did get a thumbs up from Steve Johnson when he saw it, so that made me feel really good because he's the guy who sculpted the original. And I'm trying to just get this thing finished up. It's been about 2 years since I've worked on it. I have to finish this mouth to give Slimer that beautiful smile he has, because obviously that's what really makes him look like himself, right? Those big jacked up teeth and those big ugly gums. Absolutely love it. When this is all done, once we're completely done, we will be making a new version of this out of a soft material. So this whole thing can collapse a little bit. His mouth could move. He's basically going to be a suit. Okay, so we could wear him and move on from there. So it'll be kind of a soft, squishy one, just like in the film. But for now, this is our first casting out of the mold that we made from video 1, and now in video 2 we have to focus on this goofy looking mouth, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with using some freeform air, which is a 2-part syntactic dough type material. Okay, it's basically a very lightweight material. You mix it up, it's 2 parts, and it's basically like a clay or a dough, and I can basically lay that in here to get all this nice perfect information once I release this, and I can create, I can start sculpting on that once it hardens up. All right, so then I can put clay on here and then start doing his nice beautiful jacked up teeth and all that fun stuff, do his little uvula, and then go from there. Whether this will be 3 parts that I have to mold or 2 parts, maybe I'll keep the uvula back area with the upper palate or the lower, I'm not really sure yet. I guess I'll just find out as we go. But if you want to see that 2-part dough, it's basically right here. Okay, this is a smooth-on product. You have about roughly maybe an hour to work with it. One half is white, one half is kind of gray. You mix it together, and there you go. Okay, you could smooth it out with a little water. You could actually sculpt with it. Some people have, and I've done it on occasion. But for this kind of thing, I'm not trying to get these. I'm not trying to get a perfect sculpt using that. I'm going to use clay. But I am going to use that once I release this to get this information so that I don't have any weird gaps. And when I pull this thing out to mold it, it stays in one piece, or 3 pieces as it may. So that's the important part. I'm using that to make these nice little palette areas. That way I could pull these out once the clay is all perfect and happy with the teeth on it, and then take that to molding. So that's where we're at. Let's get Slimer going. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wax up the inside of this mouth. Okay, that's basically releasing it all. So that way when I put this 2-part material in here, it doesn't stick right to it, because it will, and then that would be a problem. So little wax release. This is just some mold release. Paste wax. So this way I'm not going to have any issues. So here's what it looks like. All right. This is the freeform air. It's basically a 2-part dough. All right. We're going to mix it together. Once we get this a uniform color, we can start applying it in here. Mix this really well. Press it in against your part, so that way you're picking up all that good detail, which you'll need later for your parts once you mold them, so they snap right back in place. You could also thin this down with a little water, or brush it in, or make it smooth it out. It works well that way. Okay, what I'm doing now is I'm putting little hash marks. I'm taking a marker and I'm drawing little lines here and there just to register where this is exactly in the mouth. So that way when I pop it out and I go to put it back, I have a little bit of reference marks. You'll see I do this a lot when I'm doing animatronics, like with the fiberglass shell or things like that. A lot of times if you're gonna do something and you need to have some reference point, you just make a couple little hash marks, and that will really help figure out where things go so they go back exactly where they have to go. Now, this has to just pop out. Because we released it, it should be okay. There we go. All right, so now this information here is exactly what we need, right? This way I can sculpt on this, but I have a nice hard piece. It's not made out of clay. It's not going to come apart or bend once I put the clay on it for the teeth. So here's the lower palette. All right, you see that? That release did a really good job. Now I will say that this has been 24 hours roughly since I did this. Okay, this only takes roughly an hour or two, but really it sets all the way if you just leave it overnight, which I did. So no big deal there. You will find that screwdrivers become your favorite pry bar, but if you're in a shop long enough, you will find that anybody that's working for you will use just about anything as a pry bar. I've seen drills, I've seen screwdrivers, I've seen wrenches. Everything also becomes a hammer. So you might have a nice screwdriver, but then you might need a hammer. So you'll use another screwdriver, of course, right? I have a whole toolbox right there filled with 1,000 tools, but I'm slowly breaking this loose because I don't want it to, oh, there we go. I don't want it to break on me. Oh, there we go. Nice. Took a little paint with it, I guess, but that's okay. But now this gives me my uvula area and my upper palate for my teeth. So that way I know this can come in and out as much as I want. And I can clean up these edges here because they're a little sharp. And I'll clean some of this up because it's just old wax. That's what was all over him. It dries kind of white like this, but no big deal. I'll clean all that off, but now I have a nice area to sculpt in. I could do the back of his throat or some of the inner parts of his throat, and mostly I'm worried about his teeth. Okay, so now as long as this could go back in, now as long as I don't impede on any of these edges really, this should sit right back into place there. Oh, that's perfect, yeah. So that way once we cast this up, we have a nice area for it to snap right into. Oh, now I gotta get back out again. Hold on. And then we go from there. So next is sculpting. That's my favorite part. All right, it's time to get sculpting. You're gonna see me put on my sculpting glasses. I'm gonna start with the top half, and what you can't see is I've got my laptop over here. I've got a few different pictures of Slimer. My laptop has extreme close-ups on them, so that really helps me. I'm going to focus on this top part and, of course, the back of the throat to start with, and then I'll block this in. Right now, I'm just going to block it in with some wet clay. I'm going to show you what that is. All right, so wet clay in here. It's very soft, easy to maneuver. So nice to smooth it down. A little bit of water will make this smooth out really nicely. So I'm gonna start with the back of it, add the uvula, right? And then work on these top teeth. Once I get them done, I'm gonna probably pull this whole thing out, and then I can focus on the bottom teeth here. And then I'll be putting them back and forth just to kind of figure out what I wanna do here. But before I do that, I'm going to go silent. I'm putting a movie on so I can have something in the background. That's how I sculpt. I need music or I need video. I need something going on around me. Kind of helps me think better. I was going to put on Ghostbusters, but I actually don't own Ghostbusters, and it's fine. I don't feel like I'd probably be too involved in Ghostbusters to be sculpting Slimer here. So I think I'm just going to put on something goofy. There's a movie called Thanksgiving. I'm sure it's going to be kind of wacky, so let's see how that goes. Anyway, I'm going to get going on this, and I'll speed this film up so you can see what I'm doing, but I'm not going to sit here and sculpt for hours and have you watch that in the live timing, so that would be a little boring. But I do have my laptop with extreme close-ups. I've got Slimer ready to go. His palettes can be pulled out, all that good stuff. So he's ready to go. Let's get him looking like Slimer, which really will make me happy once you see him with the teeth, because he just doesn't look quite right yet. You know, he looks like Slimer. Everybody knows who he is, but it's not the same. So let's get going on this. So that this video isn't 19 hours long, I wanted to make sure that I sped this up pretty fast. So I apologize if it's a little too fast, but if you're just watching me push clay around, it gets a little mundane. And you could also see me looking over watching TV once in a while. I can't play the TV loud if you guys are watching me sculpt, so knowing that I sped this up meant that I could watch TV or listen to the music, which I always do when I'm sculpting. There's a lot going on in this. I'm trying to make sure that I can make teeth that fit and look right, but I'm back and forth with looking at those pictures. And of course, you know, the ones on my laptop, trying to get every angle I can correct, because I want this to be perfect and just like the original one. I'm using some tools here and there to start kind of smooth things out. But you can see it's not a slow process. And I start from the back and work my way frontward. And you'll even see that I change things quite a few times. You can see that I was making some indentations for where the teeth are going to go, because obviously that's where I need them to be. Trying to equal it out right under his nose, so kind of find my center line and work my way around. But his teeth are so jacked up, it's really hard to tell. And you have to find every angle from all those old pictures that I had. So it's not been easy, but it's fun for sure. Getting that uvula just right at certain angles had to be right. You know, I want that to look right and be something that you remember. I mean, I remember when he's screaming and opened his mouth coming towards camera, you know, you see the inside of his mouth and it makes you laugh. It's just part of his character. But those teeth, you know, they have to be just right to really read Slimer. But without his teeth, he doesn't look interesting at all to me. I mean, his whole body's done, but without his teeth, he's not Slimer. So I'm happy to get this part done. I decided to work on the top first because that really gives me his character. And that way I'm also not bumping the bottom ones. You'd be surprised how many times I have to fix things after you bang into them a few times. So here's an update. As you can see, he's got most of his teeth in there, at least the upper half. I got some molars going in the back. Kind of hard to tell what's going on back there. But once I get this to where I like it, which I'm pretty close to, I'm going to pull this out. That way I can kind of really freshen this up and make it proper. Basically sculpt the inside a little bit better. Make sure I take care of this gum line, which is really a big important part to get this just right. I am going off of pictures and profiles, and there's angles here that I got to get just right, because his teeth kind of stick forward. They don't just come straight down. So his profile is very strange as far as if it was like a person, but of course it's strange because it's fun, right? So he's got, you know, big buck teeth and they're all jacked up and sticking there. His bottom teeth are going to be probably about yay high. So you can see like that'll start to really build up his mouth, and then he'll have a tongue in there, all that good stuff. So he's getting there, but I still have some work to do. I'm about to pry this thing out. Hopefully that goes well, and then I can take this out, you know, and manipulate it and work on it the way I want. It's going to take me some time, so I'm just going to pry this out very carefully so I don't damage anything, because the clay is soft, so it's important. But I'll keep you updated. Once I pull this out, I'll start sculpting on this by hand. I may not get to it all tonight, so what happens is wet clay is easily damaged by drying it out too much. So you'll see me use a spray bottle once in a while and I will spritz it down. But right now it's got plenty of moisture to it. But if I'm not going to work on it tonight or finish it tonight, I will basically bag it up in a plastic bag. Sometimes I'll lay some wet paper towels on it. That really helps. And then you bag it up and keep it airtight. And you could honestly keep wet clay like that for sometimes weeks. I mean, I've done it for a long period of time. Not that I want to go that far with this, because what'll happen is it'll also start to mold. You know, it could get pretty gross. It also might get weird. If you put too much moisture in there, then it starts to fall apart. It leaves a lot of texture on there that you got to clean up later. So really you only want to do that once in a while. So once I get this out, I'll probably get to that point because it's getting kind of late and I'm getting tired. And I want to get this done, but I want to give it 100%. So I think what I'm going to do is take this out very carefully, wrap it in wet paper towels, bag it for tomorrow, and then I'll pick up from there. Once this is out, I could actually really get in there and do some better detail, clean up the brush strokes and my finger marks all over it. So it made sense to get it out of there so I could continue. Here is Slimer's teeth. As you can see, they're upside down on a board. And I'm going to use some Platsil Gel 25. It's a platinum-based silicone. Okay, equal parts. B and A, always label your cups. And I added a little bit of white to this one because this is a clear silicone, so I wanted to make sure that I could at least see what's going on this. This first coat is very thin. It's a small amount. This is just to pick up the details and get into all the little nooks and crannies. You want to keep it thin. And since this is a brush up mold, which means that we're just going to literally brush this on all the way around. Remember, I got to get all this information back here because that's how this whole thing will lock into Slimer, who is right there. Okay, so as I do this, I'll let you see what we're doing. So I'm back and it's time to mold this. I mixed up some Platsil Gel 25. It's a Polytech company silicone. I'm not using a lot, and you saw me add a little white to it, but I actually added some green to it. I figured, well, in the spirit of Slimer, we got to do that, right? So I've got that. I mixed it up. If you notice, platinum silicone is an awesome silicone. It's generally fairly thin and it cures pretty quick. So that's one of the good things about it, because since I'm doing a brush up mold, we got to remember with a brush up mold is that you're going to do multiple layers. So your first layer is always going to be thin to pick up all these details, right? So again, it's a brush on, so here we go. Now what you didn't see me do is I sprayed this whole thing with some crystal clear to protect the clay, okay? And that's really important because otherwise I could be brushing this and damaging the sculpture by just using this brush. All right, and I'm going very gently, to believe it or not. Brush up molds are great. They save a lot of silicone. Make sure you get that first layer on thin so you can make sure there's no air bubbles. Make sure everything's coated thoroughly and that it cures completely before you go onto the second layer, or else it could tear. So now let's try the second layer. Okay, you can see that I added a second layer of silicone. I didn't spend the time to show you me mixing it all up, but I will tell you that I used some Smooth On's Thivex. Let me get a better picture over here. That's a better one. We got plenty of them over here. It's a great product to thicken platinum or tin silicone. So that's what I use to thicken it up, to turn it into sort of a Vaseline consistency. But that way I can brush it on it and it will hold and stay where it needs to. Here's the third layer. It's not perfect, but it's fine. Just trying to build it up on certain areas. Once we get this done, plaster bandage, 2-part plaster bandage on this thing, and then we're ready to pull the clay out and we could cast one up. I want to cast one up first before I start doing the bottom teeth, because you know if the upper teeth were still in clay, I would inevitably bump them multiple times. So this is just to save my sanity. Here's the end result of part 1, plaster bandage. Not the prettiest thing. Actually, it's probably one of the worst looking ones I've ever done, but that's okay. We'll do another one on the back, another one on the front, and we'll be able to tear this thing open and get to those teeth, get them out, cast up a new set. I want Slimer's face to be done, so then I can just focus on the arms, which, you know, is its own project. Probably requires a couple life casts, and then, you know, use those as sort of my buck or my armature, and then we can sculpt on top of that, mold those up and cast them, and then we will have Slimer completely done and move on to the next thing, which I think might be my maggot. I want to make a remote control maggot that can drive around and all that fun stuff. Anyway, I do biohazard cleanup. I deal with maggots quite a lot. Like I said, I have 2 businesses. One is biohazard cleanup, and the other one, I've been owning a special effects company for 25 years, something like that. So the other business does tend to be very interesting, and I'll talk more about those as we get into more of my stories. But yeah, maggots are definitely something we come in contact with a lot. And I used to be disgusted by them, but now I'm like, hey, what's up, guys? Little high fives to them and try and, you know, I mean, they're helping me out. They're doing half the job, sort of. It's pretty gross, actually. Anyway, let me get to this. We'll go from there. Plaster bandage takes a little bit to cure, or dry, I should say. You have to have it wet, but not too wet. You should generally use warm water, and if you want to speed it up, you could add a little salt to that water. Just pull these out. I trimmed that up a little bit because it had a little bit of a unpleasant area up there that wouldn't fit into our Slimer. I'm about to start the bottom portion of Slimer's teeth, and hopefully I can knock those out pretty quick. I'm not going to get crazy into filming all the sculpting. You saw me do that with the upper palette, but now that I have these nice hard ones here, I'm not worried about dinging them with if they were clay, because that would drive me nuts. Here's the beginning of Slimer's lower teeth. I've been playing with it quite a bit. I got to get these molars just right before I can move on to the teeth that you see in the front. I'm very particular about all the shapes of everything because I want them to look exactly like the ones from the original. So it's a start. I think we are at the point of crystal clear and molding. Here's the mold for the bottom palette. I did 3 layers of silicone. It's kind of thick, but that way I don't need a plaster bandage jacket for it. So I'll cast these up. Once this cures, we'll go from there. I just poured some resin in these, in this mold here. This is the bottom teeth for Slimer. This came out not too bad. I mean, there's a lot of pits and all that, but that's not part of the mold. That is actually Smoothcast 300 that's been contaminated with a little moisture, I think. Anyway, I'll run another set, but let's see how these look in Slimer's face. You should kind of snap. Oh yeah, like it was made for it. Now that the teeth are done, I'm going to cast up a better version, of course, and then I've got to start working on the arms and his tongue. Let's get those done. I'll show those in part 3 and his final paint. ValekTheBlood.com